The smart lock on our front door had been acting up for 3 weeks, and like everything else in this house, fixing it fell to me. 2:30 in the morning, I'm crouched in our foyer with a screwdriver and my laptop, trying to reprogram the stubborn piece of technology that cost more than my first car. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a guy who built a home automation business from scratch, defeated by his own front door. Reina's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Then again. And again. My wife was upstairs, presumably asleep, but her device kept lighting up like a Christmas tree. The automatic backup notifications were syncing to our shared cloud storage, something I'd set up years ago when we still pretended to trust each other. These days, that trust felt about as reliable as this malfunctioning lock. I shouldn't have looked. Any decent husband would have ignored those notifications and focused on the task at hand. But decent husbands probably don't spend their nights fixing things while their wives get mysterious messages at ungodly hours. The first text made my stomach drop. The second made my hands shake. By the third, I was seeing everything clearly for the first time in months. Can't wait to feel you again tomorrow. Same place, same time. Tell Darren you're working late again. The sender's name made everything worse. Felix Rourde, my brother-in-law, Mira's husband. I sat there on our hardwood floor, surrounded by the tools of my trade, reading through months of messages that painted a picture no husband should ever see. Hotel receipts automatically saved to our joint account. GPS locations that had nothing to do with Reina's law firm. Photos that made me want to throw her phone against the wall. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the casual cruelty of their conversations. Jokes about my boring personality. Complaints about our stale home life. Mocking references to my dedication to work, to family, to everything I thought mattered. Poor Darren, one message read. Still thinks he married a woman who actually respects him. Felix's response. Some guys are just born to be disappointed. I closed the laptop and stared at our front door. The smart lock blinked red, still broken, still refusing to work properly. Just like everything else in my life, apparently. The house felt different now. Every family photo on the walls, every piece of furniture we'd chosen together, every shared memory, all of it contaminated by this new knowledge. Our home had become a stage set, and I'd been playing the fool without even knowing it. Reina stirred upstairs. I heard her feet hit the floor, probably heading to the bathroom. In a few hours, she'd come down for coffee, kiss my cheek, and tell me about her busy day ahead. Another performance in our ongoing charade. I picked up my tools and headed to the garage. Sleep wasn't happening tonight, and I had some thinking to do. My workshop occupied half the garage, filled with the electronic components and prototype devices that had built our comfortable life. Servers hummed quietly in the corner, processing data for the dozen small businesses that relied on my automation systems. This space was mine, the one place in our house where Reina never ventured, claiming she didn't understand the technical stuff. That lack of understanding was about to become very useful. I powered up my secondary computer, the one with enhanced privacy settings and routing capabilities that would make any digital forensics expert proud. If Reina and Felix wanted to play games, they'd learn quickly that they'd chosen the wrong opponent. The first step was simple. Document everything. Screenshots, message logs, location data, financial records. I'd built my business on attention to detail, and that same methodical approach would serve me well now. The second step required more creativity. Reina thought she was clever, but she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd betrayed someone who understood technology better than she understood law. Every digital footprint she'd left, every electronic trail of her deception was about to become evidence in a case she didn't even know was being built against her. By sunrise, I had a complete picture of their affair. 6 months of lies, dozens of hotel meetings, and enough documented evidence to ruin both their reputations. But evidence was just the beginning. I made coffee and waited for Reina to come downstairs. When she appeared, perfectly dressed for another day at the firm, I handed her a mug and smiled. "Sleep well?" I asked. "Like a baby," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "Big day ahead. Might be working late again." "Of course," I said. "I'll probably be in the workshop anyway. Got a new project I'm excited about." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. She kissed my cheek, the same mechanical gesture she'd performed for months, and headed for the door. I watched through the window as she drove away, probably already texting Felix about their next rendezvous. Poor Reina. She had no idea that her husband's new project was going to change everything. I called my office and cleared my schedule for the day. Then I drove across town to a part of Cleveland that Reina would never visit, a neighborhood where people minded their own business and asked no questions. The gym sat between a pawn shop and a check-cashing place, its windows painted black and its sign barely legible. Inside, the smell of sweat and determination filled the air. This was where I'd been coming for the past year, working out my frustrations on heavy bags and learning skills I'd never thought I'd need. Barry Koss looked up from wrapping his hands. At 65, he was still built like the heavyweight boxer he'd been in his youth, with scars that told stories and eyes that missed nothing. "You look like someone who just figured out something important," he said. Something like that. I grabbed my gloves from the locker. "Barry, you ever been married?" 3 times. Learned something new each time I got divorced." "What's the most important lesson?" He grinned, showing a gold tooth. "Never let them see you coming." I spent 2 hours working the bags, channeling months of frustration into precise combinations. Barry watched without comment, occasionally offering technique adjustments. When I finally stopped, my hands ached and my mind was clear. "Feel better?" he asked. "Getting there." I unwrapped my hand slowly. "Barry, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to make sure their spouse faced consequences for cheating, what would you suggest?" "Hypothetically?" He considered this carefully. "I'd say the best revenge is the kind that teaches a lesson, something that makes them understand exactly what they've lost. And if the cheating spouse had help, say, from a family member, then they both need to learn the same lesson." Barry's expression grew serious. "But whatever you're thinking, make sure you can live with the consequences. Revenge has a way of changing a man." I nodded and headed for the showers. Barry was right about consequences, but he was wrong about one thing. I'd already changed. The man who'd fixed that smart lock last night was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the only way to solve a problem was to break it down completely and rebuild it from scratch. My phone buzzed with a text from Mira. "Can we talk? Something's wrong with Felix lately." Perfect timing. I replied immediately. "Come over tonight. Reina's working late again." The pieces were falling into place. By the time Reina returned from her latest hotel adventure, she'd discover that her boring, predictable husband had become something much more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and all the tools necessary to make her regret every lie she'd ever told. Mira arrived at 7:30, her usual composed demeanor cracked around the edges. My sister-in-law had always been the stable one in her family, the responsible older sister who'd married young and built a quiet life, while Reina chased career ambitions and whatever else caught her attention. "Thanks for seeing me on short notice," she said, settling into our living room couch. I didn't know who else to talk to. I poured 2 glasses of wine, noting the irony of playing host in a house that no longer felt like home. "What's going on with Felix?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Mira's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her glass. "He's been different for months. Secretive, defensive, always on his phone. Last week, I found a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket. The receipt she'd found was probably from the same hotel where her husband had been meeting my wife. I kept my expression neutral, letting her continue. When I asked about it, he claimed it was for a business meeting. But Darren, the receipt was from a weekend. His company doesn't do business on Saturdays. Have you considered hiring a private investigator? I thought about it. She sipped her wine, gathering courage. But then I realized something worse. I think Reina might know what's going on. My pulse quickened. What makes you say that? Sister intuition, maybe, or the way she changes the subject whenever I mention Felix acting strange. Last month at Mom's birthday, I saw them whispering in the kitchen. When I walked in, they both went quiet and started talking about the weather. Mira was more perceptive than I'd given her credit for. She'd sensed the truth even without seeing the evidence I'd collected. The question was how much to tell her and when. Mira, if you suspected something specific, what would you want to do about it? I'd want proof first. Then I'd want them to understand exactly how much damage they'd caused. Her voice carried a steel I'd never heard before. I've given Felix 12 years of my life. If he's throwing that away for some affair, he needs to face the consequences. I made a decision that would change everything. What if I told you that you could have proof tonight? What do you mean? I retrieved my laptop from the workshop and returned to find Mira pacing by the window. Her nervous energy filled the room, and I realized she'd probably suspected the truth for longer than she'd admitted. Before I show you this, I need you to understand that there's no going back. Once you see what I'm about to show you, everything changes. She stopped pacing and faced me directly. Show me. I opened the laptop and pulled up the first screenshot, a text message from Felix to Reina discussing their next meeting. Mira's face went white, then red, then settled into an expression of cold fury that reminded me why I'd always liked her better than her sister. How long have you known? She asked. Since last night. I found their messages by accident when Reina's phone was backing up to our shared cloud storage. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months, based on what I've seen. Probably longer. Mira scrolled through more messages, her jaw tightening with each revelation. When she reached the ones where they mocked our marriages, she slammed the laptop shut. They think we're fools, she said quietly. They thought we were fools, I corrected. That was their first mistake. What's their second mistake going to be? I smiled, and Mira smiled back. In that moment, we became allies in a way that Reina and Felix would never understand. They'd betrayed not just their spouses, but the basic trust that held our families together. Now they'd learn what happened when that trust transformed into something much more dangerous. Their second mistake will be underestimating what we're willing to do about it, I said. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Mira turned out to have a cunning, strategic side that paired surprisingly well with my technical skills. By the time Reina's headlights swept across our driveway, we had outlined a plan that would quietly and thoroughly dismantle everything the cheaters thought they had built. Remember, I told Mira as she grabbed her coat, act normal. Don't give them any hint that we're onto them. Trust me, she said, adjusting her hair in the mirror. I've been acting normal for months while my husband lied straight to my face. I can keep the performance going a little longer. Reina entered through the front door. The smart lock was working perfectly now, looking slightly rumpled and carrying a faint trace of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. How was work? I asked, kissing her cheek and tasting dishonesty instead of affection. Exhausting. This case is really demanding. She glanced toward the living room. Was someone here? I thought I saw Mira's car outside. She stopped by to talk about Felix, I said lightly. Apparently, he's been acting unusual lately. Reina's expression faltered, just for a split second, before she pulled it back into her practiced calm. Unusual how? Secretive, working late, the usual signs of someone hiding something. I'm sure it's nothing serious, Reina said quickly. Felix has always been a little unpredictable. Probably, I agreed. Though Mira seemed genuinely worried, She's even thinking about hiring someone to check into it. This time, Reina couldn't mask her response. Her face went pale, and she grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter as though she needed support. "Are you all right?" I asked with gentle, intentional concern. "Just tired," she murmured. "I think I'll go to bed early tonight." "Good idea. You'll need your energy for tomorrow." She nodded and headed upstairs without another word, most likely already composing a warning message to Felix. I waited until our bedroom door clicked shut, then opened my monitoring software. Within minutes, Reina was typing rapidly on her phone. "Darren suspects something. Mira is uneasy. We need to be more careful." Felix replied almost instantly. "How much does he know?" "I'm not sure. But Mira talked about hiring an investigator. Maybe we should pause things for a while. Maybe we should have thought about that before we started this." I screenshot their entire conversation, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. Tomorrow would bring the first phase of our plan into action. Reina and Felix thought they were being careful, but they'd already made too many mistakes to cover their tracks. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, where Reina was pretending to sleep. Her breathing was too controlled, too deliberate. She was lying awake, probably wondering how much I knew and what I planned to do about it. Soon, she wouldn't have to wonder anymore. I settled into bed beside the woman who'd promised to love and honor me, listening to her fake sleep while she plotted with her lover. The irony was almost poetic. Here we were, sharing a bed while living in completely different realities, but not for much longer. My phone buzzed with a final message from Mira. "Ready when you are," I typed back. "Tomorrow we start taking our lives back." The next morning, Reina left for work with unusual haste, claiming an early meeting. I watched from the window as she drove away, then called Mira. "Phase 1 begins now," I told her. "I'm ready. Felix just left for the office. I'm going to search his home office for anything we might have missed." "Be careful. Don't take anything. Just photograph it." "Understood. What about you?" "I'm going to pay a visit to Reina's firm. Time to plant some seeds." The law office where Reina worked occupied 3 floors of a downtown building, all glass and steel and expensive furniture designed to intimidate clients into paying higher fees. I'd been there dozens of times for office parties and client events, always playing the role of the supportive husband who didn't quite fit in with the legal crowd. Today, I wasn't playing any role at all. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mr. Holloway, how nice to see you. Are you here for Reina?" "Actually, I'm here to see Jennifer Collins. Is she available?" Jennifer was Reina's closest friend at the firm and the biggest gossip in a building full of people who traded information for a living. If I wanted word to spread quickly through Reina's professional circle, Jennifer was the perfect starting point. "Darren!" Jennifer emerged from her office with the kind of enthusiastic smile that meant she was hungry for drama. "What brings you downtown?" "I was hoping to get your advice about something personal." Her eyes lit up. Jennifer lived for personal drama, especially when it involved her colleagues. "Of course. Come into my office." I followed her into a space that looked like it had been decorated by someone who'd read too many articles about power and success. Jennifer settled behind her desk and leaned forward expectantly. "What's on your mind?" "I'm worried about Reina. She's been working so many late nights lately, and I'm starting to wonder if the stress is getting to her." "Oh, that's sweet of you to be concerned. But Reina's one of our strongest attorneys. I'm sure she can handle whatever case is keeping her busy." "That's just it. I'm not sure there is a case. When I ask her about these late nights, she gets vague, changes the subject. Yesterday I tried to surprise her with dinner at the office, but security said she'd left hours earlier." Jennifer's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine curiosity. "That's unusual." "I'm probably overreacting. Marriage paranoia, you know. But I keep thinking about all those articles about lawyers and stress and how it can lead to poor decision-making." What kind of poor decision-making? Affairs, mostly. I read that lawyers have one of the highest infidelity rates of any profession. I let that hang in the air while Jennifer processed the implications. She was smart enough to read between the lines and gossipy enough to start spreading the story before I'd even left the building. Darren, I'm sure there's a perfectly innocent explanation. You're probably right. I just needed to talk to someone who knows Reina professionally. Thanks for listening, Jennifer. I stood to leave, then turned back as if remembering something important. Oh, and if you hear anything that might help me understand what's going on, I'd appreciate a heads up. I just want to make sure my wife is okay. Jennifer nodded solemnly, but the way her gaze drifted, sharp, calculating, told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just absorbing the information, she was sorting it, ranking it, imagining who would hear it first and how quickly it would spread. By lunchtime, the story would seep through the firm like a spilled drink soaking into carpet, unstoppable, silent, inevitable. And by evening, even the interns would know that Darren Holloway suspected his wife of stepping outside the marriage. Reina, for all her practiced charm, was about to learn a lesson people in her field rarely understood until it was too late. Reputation wasn't durable. It wasn't protected by skill, intelligence, or even years of service. It was glass. One crack, and people stopped looking at the hole and focused only on the fracture. My phone vibrated as I walked back toward my car, the gray clouds overhead matching the tension settling in my chest. Mira's name appeared on the screen. She didn't waste a second. Found something, she said, voice tight with urgency. A good sign. She sounded like someone who wasn't shocked anymore, just furious and ready to act. What kind of something? I asked, unlocking my car but staying outside, letting the cool air steady me. Credit card statements Felix thought he'd hidden, she said. Hotel stays, restaurant bills, gifts, even charges for lingerie I've never seen in my life. I exhaled slowly, not in surprise, confirmation. Photograph everything, I instructed. We'll need it for phase 2. Already done, she said, her tone clipped, almost trembling with a controlled sort of anger. Darren, there's something else. Something bigger. I found a burner phone hidden in his desk drawer. That stopped me. Burner phones weren't for accidents. They were for systems. This was better, far better, than anything I'd dared expect. Don't touch it, I said immediately. Just note where it is. We'll figure out how to use it later. Too late, Mira said. I already turned it on. Her voice wasn't apologetic. It was satisfied. She'd crossed a line, and she didn't regret it. You want to know the really twisted part? She continued. He has photos on it. What kind of photos? I asked, though I already had a good idea. The kind that would end both their careers, she said slowly, if they ever saw the light of day. I opened the car door and sat down, letting the weight of that settle. Felix and Reina thought they were subtle. They thought they were careful. In reality, they'd left a breadcrumb trail even a distracted teenager could follow. Every receipt, every message, every clandestine purchase, they weren't just mistakes. They were a blueprint of their downfall, a downfall they authored themselves. Mira, I said, shifting gears from analysis to strategy, how do you feel about attending a family dinner this weekend? A pause. Then her voice returned, lower now, sharper. What exactly are you planning? I think it's time for a small reunion, I said. Nothing dramatic. Just a gathering. And nothing brings people together like shared secrets. There was a beat of silence, and then Mira exhaled, almost a laugh, but not a happy one. I'll call Mom and set it up, she said. She's been waiting for an excuse to have everyone over anyway. As I drove home, the last 24 hours replayed in my mind, not in fragments, but as a transformation. Yesterday morning, I'd been a dedicated husband living in a reality carefully shaped by someone else's lies. Today, I wasn't confused or passive or hurt. I was a man with clarity, a man with purpose, a man with a plan, one that was unfolding piece by piece with the precision of clockwork. And best of all, I wasn't doing it alone. I had an ally who understood the stakes, the anger, and the justification behind every move we were making. Whatever came next, Felix and Reina wouldn't see it coming. Not until it was far, far too late. Reina and Felix had started this game, but they were about to learn that some games have consequences they'd never considered. Sunday dinner at Eleanor Holloway's house had been a monthly tradition for as long as Reina and I had been married. Reina's mother insisted on these gatherings, claiming they kept the family close. Usually, I found them tedious. 3 hours of forced conversation and passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern. This Sunday would be different. I arrived early to help Eleanor set up, bringing wine and the kind of expensive appetizers that would put everyone in a good mood. Mira was already there, looking composed despite everything we'd discovered about our spouses. "How are you holding up?" I asked quietly, while Eleanor fussed with place settings in the dining room. "Better than expected. It's amazing how clarity can replace confusion." Mira arranged flowers in a vase with steady hands. "I've been thinking about what happens after tonight. One step at a time. First, we see how they react when they're in the same room with us." Eleanor emerged from the dining room, wiping her hands on her apron. "Darren, dear, you look thin. Are you eating enough? Is Reina taking care of you?" "Reina's been very busy with work lately," I said, "but I'm managing fine. That girl works too hard. She needs to remember that marriage requires attention too." If only she knew how much attention Reina had been giving to marriage, just not her own. Felix and Reina arrived within minutes of each other, which wasn't suspicious since they'd probably coordinated their timing to avoid appearing together. Felix carried flowers for Eleanor and wore the kind of expensive casual clothes that screamed successful businessman. Reina had chosen a conservative dress that made her look like the respectable attorney she pretended to be. "Sorry we're late," Felix announced, kissing Eleanor's cheek. "Traffic was terrible." "I got held up at the office," Reina added, hugging her mother. "Had to finish reviewing some contracts." Mira and I exchanged glances. Even now, surrounded by family, they couldn't stop lying. Dinner conversation started normally, Eleanor asking about work, Mira discussing her volunteer activities, Felix bragging about his latest business deals. I played my usual role as the quiet technical guy who listened more than he spoke. But I was watching, and what I saw confirmed everything Mira and I had suspected. Felix and Reina were careful not to look directly at each other, but they were acutely aware of each other's presence. When Reina laughed at one of Felix's stories, she caught herself and glanced nervously at Mira. When Felix complimented the wine I'd brought, Reina's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. They were lovers trying to act like in-laws, and the strain was showing. "Darren, you've been quiet tonight," Eleanor observed. "Is everything all right?" "Just thinking about family," I replied. "How important it is to be honest with the people you love." Reina's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Felix suddenly became very interested in his salad. "Honesty is the foundation of any good relationship," Mira added smoothly. "Don't you think so, Felix?" "Absolutely," Felix replied, his voice slightly strained. "Trust is everything." "Speaking of trust," I continued, "Mira mentioned that you've been working a lot of weekends lately, Felix. That must be difficult for your marriage." "Business is demanding," Felix said quickly, "but Mira understands." "The same way I understand Reina's late nights," I replied, "though sometimes I wonder if we're being too understanding, too trusting." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eleanor looked confused by the sudden tension. Reina and Felix looked like they wanted to disappear. "What do you mean?" Reina asked carefully. "Just that sometimes people take advantage of trust. They assume their loved ones will never question their stories or check up on their activities. That's a rather cynical view, Felix said, attempting a laugh that came out forced and hollow. Is it? I've been reading about infidelity statistics lately. Did you know that most cheating spouses get caught because they become careless? They start making mistakes, leaving evidence, getting sloppy with their lies. Mira picked up the thread seamlessly. Really? What kind of evidence? Phone records, credit card statements, hotel receipts. Amazing how much of a trail people leave when they think no one is paying attention. Reina had gone pale. Felix was gripping his wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Why the sudden interest in infidelity? Eleanor asked, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. Professional curiosity, I lied smoothly. I've been working with a client who does digital forensics for divorce attorneys. Fascinating stuff. You'd be amazed what people think they can hide in the digital age. Sounds invasive, Felix muttered. Only if you have something to hide, Mira replied sweetly. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence, punctuated by Eleanor's attempts to restart normal conversation. Reina barely touched her food. Felix excused himself twice to use the bathroom, probably trying to compose himself. When Eleanor went to the kitchen to prepare coffee, the four of us sat in silence that felt thick enough to cut. Well, Felix said finally, this has been interesting. Hasn't it? I agreed. Amazing what you learn when you really pay attention to family dynamics. Some things are better left unexamined, Reina said quietly. I disagree, Mira replied firmly. I think everything should be examined, closely, thoroughly, until the truth comes out. Felix stood abruptly. I should head home. Early morning tomorrow. Running away so soon? I asked mildly. Not running, just leaving. Of course. Give my regards to whoever you're meeting tomorrow. Felix's face flushed red, but before he could respond, Eleanor returned with coffee and dessert. The moment passed, but the message had been delivered. They knew that we knew. Now, the real game could begin. After Felix left, Reina lingered, helping her mother clean up while clearly trying to figure out how much damage had been done. Darren seemed different tonight, she said to Eleanor while loading the dishwasher. He's been under a lot of stress lately, I replied from the doorway. Work pressure, marriage concerns, the usual. What kind of marriage concerns? Eleanor asked with maternal alarm. Nothing serious, Reina said quickly. Just normal stuff. Actually, I said, stepping into the kitchen, I've been worried about trust issues, communication problems. You know how it is when people start keeping secrets from each other. Reina's hands stilled on the dishes. Everyone has private thoughts, Darren. Thoughts are one thing. Actions are something else entirely. Eleanor looked back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. Is there something you two need to discuss? We'll talk at home, Reina said firmly. Yes, I agreed. I think it's time we had a very honest conversation. The drive home unfolded in heavy, deliberate silence, the kind that fills a car like fog. The only sound was the steady hum of the engine and the faint rustle of tires against pavement. Streetlights drifted past in slow intervals, casting bands of yellow across Reina's face as she stared rigidly out the passenger window. She didn't look at me once, not even sideways. That alone told me more than any confession could. Her posture was stiff, almost defensive. One hand rested on her knee, the other gripped her purse like it was a lifeline. She was thinking furiously, replaying earlier conversations, searching for clues, trying to figure out how much I knew and what she could still hide. I could practically hear the gears turning inside her head. You know, she said finally, breaking the quiet without turning toward me. If you have something to say to me, you should just say it. Her voice was brittle, stretched thin, the tone of someone forcing confidence, because the alternative was losing control. I'm planning to, I said evenly. Very soon. That made her shift in her seat, What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I slowed the car as we turned onto our street, the familiar row of houses suddenly feeling colder, more distant. I parked in our driveway and cut the engine. The cabin went dark except for the soft glow of the dashboard lights. In that muted half-light, Reina looked older than 34. Not physically, just worn down by the work of keeping stories straight, by the weight of secrets she hadn't been built to carry long-term. It means, I said finally, that some conversations require preparation, evidence, documentation. Her breath hitched just slightly. Evidence of what? You tell me, Reina. I met her eyes now, letting the question land. What do you think I might need evidence for? For a moment she froze. Her lips parted as if she wanted to protest, to deny, to redirect, but she must have realized any answer she gave could incriminate her further. Instead, she closed her mouth, inhaled sharply, and reached for the door handle. She got out of the car quickly, her heels striking the concrete with short, angry clicks. Not just irritation, fear disguised as frustration. She walked to the house without waiting for me, fumbling slightly with her keys before remembering the smart lock would open automatically. Inside, she didn't linger in the kitchen or check her messages like she usually did before bed. She didn't rehearse her schedule for tomorrow or ask about mine. She didn't even take off her shoes. She just went straight upstairs, fast, tense, rattled. And rattled people make mistakes. Big ones. The house fell into a thick quiet after she closed the bedroom door. I stood in the entryway for a moment, letting the calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes right before a plan moves from theory to action. My phone buzzed, a text from Mira. How do you think that went? I replied, perfectly. They're scared now. Her response came seconds later. Good. What's next? I typed, tomorrow we escalate. Are you ready for phase 3? More than ready. Let's finish this. I slipped my phone into my pocket and walked toward my workshop, the one place in the house untouched by lies. The faint scent of sawdust and engine oil was grounding, familiar. I sat at my workbench, opened my laptop, and brought up the files, programs, and tools that Mira and I had prepared. Above me, through the ceiling vents, I could hear Reina pacing, short, frantic steps back and forth across the bedroom floor. She was typing too, the faint vibration of her phone buzzing against the nightstand. She thought she still had time. She thought she still had choices. But the next stage of our plan was already unfolding. And tomorrow, everything would change. Felix's burner phone had been a goldmine of information, but more importantly, it had given me access to accounts and contacts I hadn't known existed. With a few keystrokes, I began the process that would systematically dismantle the life he'd built on lies. By morning, Felix would discover that his carefully hidden activities weren't as hidden as he'd thought. And Reina would learn that her boring, predictable husband had some very unpredictable skills. They'd started this war with betrayal and deception. I was going to finish it with the two things they'd never expected from me: intelligence and ruthlessness. The game was no longer about catching them in lies. Now it was about making them pay for every lie they'd told. Monday morning brought the first real consequences of our weekend performance. I was in my workshop by 6 a.m., monitoring the digital traps I'd set the night before, when my phone rang. Darren, it's Jennifer Collins. I hope I'm not calling too early. Reina's gossipy colleague sounded excited, which meant my seeds of suspicion had taken root exactly as planned. Not at all, Jennifer. What's going on? I wanted to give you a heads up about something. After our conversation last week, I started paying more attention to Reina's schedule. There are some inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? Well, last Friday she told everyone she had a client meeting that would run late, but I happened to drive by the client's office around 7 p.m. and their parking lot was empty. Their building was completely dark. I let silence stretch for a moment, as if processing this information with growing concern. Jennifer, I appreciate you looking out for me, but I don't want you to feel like you have to spy on your colleague. It's not spying when someone's behavior affects the whole firm's reputation. And Darren, there's something else. Some of the partners have been asking questions about Reina's billable hours. They're not adding up properly. This was even better than I'd hoped. Questions about her hours? She's been claiming overtime for meetings that apparently never happened. If the partners investigate and find discrepancies, it could be grounds for disciplinary action. I see. Well, I'm sure there's an explanation. I hope so, for everyone's sake. After Jennifer hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Reina's professional life was beginning to unravel, and she didn't even know it yet. By the time she arrived at the office this morning, whispers would already be circulating about her mysterious absences and questionable billing practices. My computer chimed with an alert from the monitoring software I'd installed on our shared network. Reina was awake and already checking her phone. Based on the data patterns, she was sending a flurry of text messages, probably warning Felix about last night's dinner conversation. I switched to my secondary system and accessed the files Mira had photographed from Felix's home office. His financial records painted a picture of a man living beyond his means, using credit cards and business loans to fund an expensive lifestyle that included regular hotel visits and lavish gifts for someone who wasn't his wife. More importantly, I'd found evidence of something that would destroy him completely: tax irregularities that suggested he'd been hiding income from his business partnerships. My phone buzzed with a text from Mira. Felix left for work early. Seemed agitated. How are things on your end? Reina's about to have a very bad day at the office. Are you ready for the next phase? Absolutely. What do you need me to do? Meet me at the coffee shop on Elm Street at 10 a.m. Bring the documents we discussed. See you there. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made me look professional but approachable. Today's performance required a different character than the one I'd played at dinner, less threatening, more concerned husband seeking advice. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush when I arrived. Mira was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop bag and the kind of determined expression that meant she was ready for battle. You look like a woman with a plan, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. I've been thinking about this all night. They've been lying to us for months, Darren, making us look like fools while they sneak around behind our backs. That ends today. Mira opened her laptop bag and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. Everything's here: credit card statements, hotel receipts, phone records from the burner device, even photos I found on Felix's personal computer. Photos? Let's just say they were very thorough in documenting their affair. I flipped through the folder, impressed by Mira's attention to detail. She'd assembled a complete case file that would stand up in any divorce court. This is excellent work, but we're not just building a legal case. We're building a public relations nightmare. What do you mean? Think about it. Felix's business depends on his reputation in the community. Reina's law firm prides itself on ethical behavior and family values. What happens when their colleagues and clients learn about their extracurricular activities? Mira's eyes lit up with understanding. They lose everything. Exactly. But we need to be strategic about how we release this information. Too much at once, and people might dismiss it as a vindictive spouse's revenge fantasy. We need to let the truth emerge gradually, naturally. Like a slow-motion explosion. Perfect analogy. We spent the next hour buried in strategy, real strategy, not the frantic improvisation of people reacting to pain. This was deliberate, structured, almost surgical, the kind of planning that requires a calm mind and a cold heart. And Mira, to my surprise, possessed both. She had a sharpness beneath her quiet demeanor, a calculating streak that aligned perfectly with my technical precision. Together, we formed a kind of symmetry. She supplied motive and emotional insight, and I supplied tools, timing, and execution. By the time we were done, The whiteboard was filled from corner to corner. We had constructed a campaign that would unfold over several weeks, striking Felix and Reina from different angles, professionally, socially, privately. Each step designed to build pressure, to expose contradictions, to erode their carefully curated images layer by layer. Nothing illegal, nothing reckless, just truth released at the precise moment it would do the most damage. As Mira gathered her things, she paused, her brow tightening with a thought she hadn't yet voiced. "There's something else," she said slowly. "Something I can't stop thinking about." I looked up. "What is it?" "The photos on Felix's computer," she said. Some of them weren't taken in random places. I recognized the backgrounds, his office, our living room, the guest room in our vacation cabin, even his workshop. I felt the air shift. "They used your personal spaces for their affair?" "Apparently," Mira said, her mouth twisting in disgust, "which means they violated more than just our marriages. They violated our homes, our privacy, our sense of safety." Her words hit harder than she realized. It was one thing for two selfish people to sneak around, hotel rooms, cars, restaurants. That was insulting and cruel, yes. But bringing their behavior into the spaces where Mira and I slept, worked, hosted family, that was another level entirely. It meant every room in both of our houses carried memories we never consented to. Memories they created on our time, on our property, surrounded by our belongings. It was invasive, it was deliberate, and it was unforgivable. "That changes things," I said quietly. Mira studied me closely. "How so?" "It means this isn't about betrayal alone. It's about a breach of trust so deep it touches every part of our lives, and that requires a more comprehensive response." Her expression hardened, not with rage but with a cold clarity that mirrored my own. "What did you have in mind?" "A finale they'll never forget," I said. "Something that forces them to face exactly what they've broken. Something public, undeniable, and unforgettable." Mira crossed her arms. "I'm listening." "Next weekend is the annual Community Foundation Gala," I said. "You know the one. Big venue, lots of donors, half the town shows up. People from Reina's legal circles, Felix's business network, colleagues, mentors, future clients. Everyone who helps shape reputation in this town." Mira nodded slowly as the implication sank in. "You want to expose them publicly?" "No," I corrected. "I want to give them the opportunity to confess publicly, and when they refuse, which they absolutely will, I want to ensure that everyone in that room sees them for who they really are. No exaggerations, no speculation, just truth." For the first time since this entire nightmare began, Mira's face transformed, not with sadness, not with rage, but with something closer to satisfaction. A small, steady smile formed, genuine and unrestrained, as if she could finally see the path forward. "All right," she said softly. "Let's do it." Her voice held something dangerous and something free. "Darren, I think this partnership is going to work out very well." As I drove home, my phone rang with a call from Reina. She sounded stressed and angry. "Darren, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "I'm always honest with you, Reina." "Have you been talking to people at my firm about our marriage?" "Why would you ask that?" "Because Jennifer Collins cornered me this morning with questions about my work schedule. She seemed to know things about my personal life that I haven't shared with anyone." "Maybe she's just being observant. You have been working a lot of late nights lately." "That's not the point. The point is that people are starting to gossip, and gossip can damage my career." "Then maybe you should give them less to gossip about." Silence stretched between us for several seconds. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked finally. "It means that if you're concerned about your reputation, you might want to examine the choices you've been making lately." I don't know what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything, Reina. I'm stating facts. Your behavior has changed. Your schedule has become erratic. People are starting to notice. Are you accusing me of something? I'm suggesting that you consider how your actions affect not just your own reputation, but our marriage and our family relationships. Another long silence. We need to talk when I get home tonight, she said finally. Yes, we do. I think it's time we had a completely honest conversation about the state of our marriage. Fine. But Darren, if you've been spreading rumors about me… I don't spread rumors, Reina. I deal in facts, and the facts speak for themselves. I ended the call and smiled. Reina was beginning to understand that her comfortable world of lies and deception was collapsing around her, but she had no idea how much worse things were about to get. By the time I reached home, my email had 3 new messages from potential clients who'd heard about my digital forensics capabilities. Word was spreading through Cleveland's legal community that Darren Holloway was the man to call when you needed to uncover hidden electronic evidence. Ironic, considering that my own wife was about to become my most famous case study. I spent the afternoon implementing the next phase of our plan. By evening, Felix would discover that his carefully hidden financial irregularities had been anonymously reported to the appropriate tax authorities. Reina would find that her billing discrepancies had been flagged for internal review by her firm's ethics committee. They'd started this game thinking they were smarter than their boring, predictable spouses. They were about to learn that intelligence and predictability weren't the same thing at all. The Community Foundation Gala was Cleveland's social event of the year, a chance for the city's elite to dress up, donate money to worthy causes, and gossip about each other in expensive clothes. Reina had been looking forward to it for months, seeing it as an opportunity to network with potential clients and show off her success. She had no idea it would become the stage for her public humiliation. I spent the morning of the gala making final preparations. The presentation I'd assembled would be delivered through the hotel's audio-visual system, a system I'd helped install 2 years earlier when they upgraded their conference facilities. Having backdoor access to their network was just one of many advantages of being the boring technical guy everyone overlooked. Mira arrived at our house at noon, carrying a garment bag and wearing an expression of grim determination. "How are you feeling?" I asked as she hung up her dress for the evening. "Like someone who's about to take her life back," she replied. "Felix has been acting strange all week, nervous, defensive, constantly checking his phone. That's because his world is starting to fall apart. The tax investigation, the business irregularities, the questions about his finances. He's beginning to understand that his secrets aren't secret anymore." "What about Reina?" "Her firm put her on administrative leave pending an ethics review. She's been trying to figure out who reported her billing irregularities, but she hasn't considered that it might be her own husband." Mira smiled grimly. "They really have no idea what's coming, do they?" "None at all. They're so focused on covering their tracks that they haven't realized we've already mapped every step they've taken." We spent the afternoon reviewing our plan one final time. The gala would begin with cocktails and socializing, followed by dinner and a series of presentations about the foundation's work. My presentation would be the final one of the evening, a supposedly impromptu addition to discuss digital privacy and family security in the modern age. By the time I finished speaking, everyone in attendance would understand exactly what kind of people Reina and Felix really were. The hotel ballroom was elegant and crowded when we arrived. Reina looked stunning in a black evening gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Felix wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo and his usual confident smile. They circulated separately, playing their roles as respectable members of the community. If you didn't know what to look for, you'd never suspect they were lovers. But I knew their tells now. The way Reina's eyes followed Felix across the room, the way Felix positioned himself to keep her in his peripheral vision, the careful coordination that ensured they were never photographed together. "They're good at this," Mira observed quietly, as we watched them work the room. "They've had plenty of practice," I replied. "But tonight, the performance ends." Dinner passed slowly, with the usual speeches about community service and charitable giving. I played my part as the supportive husband, applauding Reina's introduction to the crowd and smiling when people complimented her work at the law firm. Felix gave a presentation about his company's charitable contributions, speaking eloquently about the importance of integrity and community trust. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Finally, the evening's organizer approached the podium for the final introduction. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special addition to tonight's program. Darren Holloway, one of our community's leading technology experts, has prepared a presentation about digital security and privacy, issues that affect all our families in today's connected world." I stood and walked to the front of the room, noting how Reina's expression shifted from surprise to concern. She hadn't known I was speaking tonight, which was exactly what I'd intended. "Thank you," I began, looking out at the crowd of Cleveland's social elite. "I want to talk to you tonight about trust, specifically how technology has changed the way we trust each other and the way that trust can be betrayed." I clicked to my first slide, which showed a generic smartphone displaying text messages. Most of us carry devices that contain our entire lives, our conversations, our locations, our financial transactions, our most private thoughts. We trust that this information will remain private. But what happens when that trust is violated? Reina had gone pale. Felix was staring at me with growing alarm. "Let me share a case study with you. The names have been changed, of course, but the situation is real and relevant to our community." The next slide showed a timeline of communications between two people identified only as Subject A and Subject B. Subject A is a respected professional, a lawyer known for ethical behavior and family values. Subject B is a successful businessman, married with children, active in community organizations. I could hear murmurs from the audience as people began to pay closer attention. For 6 months, Subject A and Subject B conducted an affair, believing that their digital communications were private and secure. They used burner phones, separate email accounts, and encrypted messaging apps. They thought they were being careful. Felix started to stand, but Mira placed a firm hand on his arm, keeping him in his seat. But here's what they didn't understand about digital privacy. Everything leaves a trail. Every text message, every email, every GPS location, every financial transaction creates a permanent record. The next slide showed hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and location data, all carefully anonymized but clearly documenting a pattern of deception. Subject A claimed to be working late while actually meeting Subject B at various hotels. Subject B used business credit cards to pay for romantic dinners and expensive gifts. They documented their affair with photos and videos, never considering that digital files can be recovered and analyzed. Reina was gripping her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Several people in the audience were looking around, trying to figure out who the subjects might be. But the most interesting aspect of this case isn't the technology, it's the human element. You see, Subject A and Subject B weren't just having an affair. They were violating the trust of people who loved them, people who had built their lives around believing in their integrity. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a family photo, generic enough to represent any family, specific enough to make the point. Subject A is married to someone who supported their career for over a decade. Subject B is married to someone who trusted them completely, never questioning their absences or their stories about working late. The room had gone completely quiet. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. When Subject A and Subject B's spouses discovered the affair, they faced a choice. They could quietly file for divorce, split their assets, and move on with their lives. Or they could ensure that the community understood exactly what kind of people they'd been trusting. Felix was sweating now, his confident smile replaced by panic. Reina looked like she wanted to disappear. They chose accountability. Because when people violate trust on this scale, when they lie to their families and their communities while presenting themselves as pillars of integrity, there have to be consequences. I clicked to the final slide, which showed two silhouettes labeled Subject A and Subject B, with the words, "Accountability Matters" underneath. The lesson here isn't about technology or digital privacy. It's about character. It's about the difference between the people we pretend to be and the people we actually are. I paused and looked directly at Reina, then at Felix. And sometimes, the only way to restore trust in a community is to expose the people who have been systematically destroying it. The applause started slowly, then built to a sustained ovation. But I wasn't finished yet. Before I conclude, I want to thank two people who helped me understand the importance of this work. My wife Reina and my brother-in-law Felix, who taught me that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we should trust least. The applause died instantly. You could have heard a pin drop in that ballroom. Reina stood abruptly, her chair falling backward with a crash. Felix was frozen in place, his face white with shock. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued calmly, "I present to you Subject A and Subject B, living proof that integrity is a choice, and some people choose poorly." The room erupted in chaos. People were turning to stare at Reina and Felix, phones were coming out to capture the moment, and conversations were breaking out at every table. Reina pushed through the crowd toward the exit, her elegant composure completely shattered. Felix tried to follow, but several people blocked his path, demanding explanations. Mira stood and walked to the front of the room, taking the microphone from my hand. "For those who are wondering," she said clearly, "everything Darren just told you is true. My husband and his sister have been having an affair for 6 months, lying to our faces while we supported their careers and their reputations." She looked directly at Felix, who was still trapped near his table. "Felix, you wanted to know what it felt like to be publicly humiliated? Now you know." The crowd was in complete chaos now, with people shouting questions and demanding details. Hotel security was moving toward the front of the room, but they were too late to contain the situation. I took Mira's hand and led her toward the exit, walking past Felix without acknowledging his presence. As we reached the door, I turned back for one final look at the scene we'd created. Reina was gone, probably hiding in the parking garage or calling a taxi. Felix was surrounded by angry business associates and former friends, all demanding explanations he couldn't provide. The Foundation Gala had become the social scandal of the decade, and everyone in Cleveland's elite circles would be talking about it for years to come. "How do you feel?" I asked Mira as we walked to our car. "Free," she replied without hesitation. "For the first time in months, I feel completely free." As we drove away from the hotel, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're going to pay for this, Darren." I showed the message to Mira, who laughed. "Let them threaten," she said. "What are they going to do? Ruin our reputations? Destroy our marriages? They already did that." She was right. Reina and Felix had started this war when they chose deception over honesty, betrayal over loyalty. Tonight, we'd simply finished what they began. The game was over, and we'd won. Not because we were better people, but because we'd been smarter, more patient, and more ruthless than they'd ever imagined possible. Sometimes the boring, predictable spouse turns out to be the most dangerous enemy of all. 6 months later, I was sitting in my workshop when the divorce papers arrived. Reina had finally stopped trying to negotiate and accepted the inevitable. She would get nothing beyond what the prenuptial agreement specified, and her reputation in Cleveland's legal community was permanently destroyed. Felix's business had collapsed within weeks of the gala. His partners had dissolved their agreements, his clients had fled, and the tax investigation had revealed enough irregularities to keep him busy with lawyers for years to come. Mira had moved into a smaller house across town and started her own consulting business. We'd become closer friends than we'd ever been as in-laws, bonded by the shared experience of rebuilding our lives from the wreckage our spouses had created. "Any regrets?" she asked during one of our regular coffee meetings. "None," I replied honestly. "They made their choices. We just made sure those choices had appropriate consequences. Think they learned anything from it? I doubt it. People like Reina and Felix don't learn. They just find new ways to justify their behavior. But I didn't care what they learned or didn't learn. My focus was on the future I was building, one based on honesty instead of deception, respect instead of betrayal. The smart lock on my front door worked perfectly now, just like everything else in my life.